There's obviously a bunch of players as well I want to talk a little bit about, reminisce on, because while we're on the topic of this French scene, Maniac, one thing I have to bring up is, even though I was there, so I know why at the time there was a logic and things sort of made sense. When you look back now, it does look so fucking stupid that France only has 2 majors ever, and then basically one was with Sharks and one was with Kenny S. If you go back in time, isn't the first thing you do just have Shocks and Kenny S just play together from the beginning? You know what I mean? It feels like such a waste, bro, because in any other scene, you almost would never have this. The joke is the only comparison I can sort of give is it's a bit like that weird thing that Heroic has now, where even though Heroic's slipping off, somehow it's not on the table to get Blame F or Device. You know what I mean? You just think but bro, they did this as well. Why don't you just go get them today? We're right back in the mix. But it just doesn't happen, right? But that's at least there's the logic of maybe there's business stuff. This is back when the scene was tiny. Back then it was the real old school Counter-Strike where you just pick someone up if they want to join. That's it. They don't have a choice. Even back then, even if them all comes, yeah, but we've got a contract. It's here's 10Ks. Fuck off. You know what I mean? It's not really a thing. You don't. They can't really football. We're not letting them go. It's not a big enough offer. It's not like that. So back then, the craziest thing is it would have been incredibly easy. So as far as I know, Maniac, as an outsider, it's just some stupid shit here's the one thing I don't get, mate. I get the idea of if you look at their dynamic, Shocks is more the person who's a bit of an instigator. That's why if you notice, he always leaves the team or gets kicked. And then Kenny S is just the guy who just wants to play CS, so he just comes in and joins. But what do you actually think there was some was there some unspoken of rivalry between them two? Because they all claim there isn't. But again, I would have thought even they would sort of one day have met in a bar and be wait a minute, I'm losing the tournament. Why don't we just, you're even a rifler, I'm a fucking AWPer. There's not even any overlap. To me, it's crazy these players didn't just play together for 10 years, Maniac. I think it's crazy.
So, I agree with you. In retrospect, I don't really understand what
it's wild, isn't it? France should have 5 majors or something, mate.
I will say I cannot really speak to an unspoken rivalry between the two because I'm not aware of it. First-hand experience, I haven't really experienced that. What I do know is that we have to put everything in context. And then in 2013, 2014, maybe even beginning of 2015, we are very far from the level of professionalism we have now.
Oh, for sure,
Right now, you have teams who are run as a knit-type project, and you are optimizing whatever it is you can do. And if people are not friends, then tough luck. You're going to work together. If you don't, you're going to lose your contract. And that's just it. You walk the line, you get better, or you get kicked. At the time, I think, first of all, players were holding a much greater power over where the team was going. And this was the 2013, 2014 rule, at least in French Counter-Strike. It could have been different in other countries. But in France, some players held the power over what the hell was happening. And it was their opinion, and it was their say that was going first, and not the coach, not the general manager, not the CEO of the org. If you wanted a player, then that came with his opinion, and you trusted him. And I think this lasted for a very long time, probably as a sort of a side effect of the success that the French scene had in different games. So some players came up, a la Existence, for example, whenever what he would say would be gospel. For a long time, if he had an opinion, that was it. You were not going to challenge it. That was his project. And then, so that was step one. So I think some players at the time probably believed that this was better to keep them apart, because also, that's another point, we had shitty attitudes at the time. You think we talk about how Simple could have been a shit kid when he started going? He wasn't the only one. Kenyas was horrible to play with at times. He was actually, he was, this funny graph, which is was it hotness and craziness, and you have to be as hot as you are crazy, so it works. Kenyas was straight in sort of that narrative. He was so incredibly gifted and talented and impactful that you would put up with whatever crazy spiel he would go through in a game, or before a game, or after a map, or during an event. And I think Shocks was also at times in the middle of some trouble that was happening in teams, that people thought, if these two can come together, we're not, no one wants to be in charge of a project that is actually going to have these two potentially clashing and going to an actual nuclear fission. No one thinks we're going to be able to handle it, because first of all, we were kids. I'm not going to pretend I was sitting here an old bearded man and I knew all the truth to the world. Absolutely not. I was out there drinking like an idiot when there would be a game day the next day. So I did the same mistakes. We were kids and we had no idea of the magnitude of what was happening as we were living it. We were just kind of playing Counter-Strike.
More like rock and roll vibe, right?
Sort of, and now obviously what we do is we're in 2023. we know all that's on the line. So we look back at this and we're like, oh, what the fuck? Why did they not do this? Like, this would have been so incredible. They could have had many majors. At the time, we had no idea there would ever be a moment where 19 majors were played. It was a major.
Yes.
And then, oh, there's another one major. Wow, that's great. Wow, a third major. That's crazy. Where are we going with this? Stickers money. Woo! We had a completely different vision. And not a lot of people were ready to put the W above everything. And I include myself in that category. I don't think I had the long teeth. And so that's probably one of the reasons why the French scene kind of shot itself in the foot. Because, yeah, with the talent that we had, I think there could have been many more titles than what actually turned out to be.
By the way, on that exact topic as well, it's funny because back then, it's a joke because I can even give the perfect reference point. Essentially, what I do with MSL now in Alexi B, where everyone's like, we shut the fuck up about them, it's over, just get over it already. That's what I did with Existence famously for many, many, many years, right? And people don't get it, especially if they're not from Source, because they don't understand, like, the reason this character was so fascinating and almost like some Shakespearean tragedy where, like, Othello or some shit where, like, they could have done so many great things, but they get betrayed by the wrong person in the wrong, all that sort of jazz, is because here's the analogy I would give people. If everyone remembers, like 4 or 5 years ago in football, that player for Chelsea was fucking unbelievable, Eden Hazard, the Belgian player, right? And everyone was fucking loving him because at the time the game had just been dominated by Messi and Ronaldo for so many years that, like, it was cool that there was like, wow, there's another player who could, like, be on that sort of level and do, like, amazing shit in the game. But the problem is, if people know, famously, I think it was a mixture of, like, injuries and because he went to Real Madrid or something, like, his game just completely went off the boil and he was never that great again, essentially. And people did the same thing for years, even to this day, technically. Like, people want him to go back to Chelsea now and hope it, like, magically, like, cargo cult reboot his career and it'll all be like, like some fucking, oh, it's all going to be great now, he's back or whatever, which probably won't happen if he wasn't that good the last few years. So essentially, like, the reason why I get why people get obsessed, though, is because the analogy I'm giving there is, you want someone who the actual ceiling on what they could do, like, if they got it all together, is ideally the top. It's to be the absolute best, is to do everything to get. If people don't know, Existence was that guy back then. Like, if you look back at the scene back then, when you have, like, Fanatics winning championships, like NIP's one of the best Virtus Pros around, Carrigan and Astralis are coming up, like, Existence actually, for real, was a contender with any of the other IGLs. And at the time also, you had a mad impact on the game. Like, there was an era where they had, like, a bit of, like, Existence-style tactics and people doing stuff from Spawn and classic CS, That wasn't just, like, only NIP, loose-style CS. We definitely had the mixture in the game. So I always feel like people don't realise that isn't just some, like, oh, it's an old famous guy, wasn't that good. It's like, first of all, it's so infuriating. Like, no one will ever really know why. Why did he fail just those majors? Because if people don't know, it would pretty much just be the majors. Like, every other tournament was just normal. And then he would go to a major and it was like reverse Superman. It's like he turns into Clark Kent. Like, what the fuck? And so no one ever understood. It was really mysterious why it kept happening. In fact, the joke is people started that whole thing that he was choking pretty early on. They did it like 2 or 3 majors in. So at the time, I remember him being like, come on, it's only a couple of tournaments. But by the end, it became like self-fulfilling. Like, even he believed it by the end. Everyone thought he was just choking by the end. So what do you think on this topic? Because some people think I'm just going too far with it. But you see why I give the MSL analogy? Like, when MSL was right and he had his right teams, it really made CS interesting. Like, there was another player with a totally distinct style who was going to have his own chances to go to the top. Like, to me, Existence is one of, like, the big what-ifs in CSGO. It could have been so different if he'd ever had his head dialed in at these majors.
Yeah, listen, that's possible. When we joined Titan, so that is 2014, it's probably Q3 of 2014, as Cali, Apex, and we joined KNS and Existence. I already knew him for a few years, but I hadn't played with him. So this is where I really got to know the guy and how he was thinking. And at the time, it was already sort of, the monster had already sort of formed in the back of its head that majors were something that were gonna bring him trouble forever. I feel like this was already a thing, when you talk to someone and they already ahead of time talk about how they fucked up at majors and this time around, this lineup, that's the moment, it's finally gonna happen. I could already see that there was, the seed of the doubt was already firmly planted. I never really knew exactly how it started. I know my hypothesis has always been that after the first one, where they famously lose to NIP in Stockholm, right? Oh wait, no, Jönköping at the time, not Stockholm, Jönköping. I think after that, they might have made the mistake of looking ahead a little bit further or too far in the tournament when they were playing this group stage, thinking about, how we're going to get to quarter, to semi, to final this time, guys, we really have to win this. Because I don't know if you remember, I think you probably remember this, when Titan was put together, the branding was very ambitious. I thought this was very dangerous. They got put together with the very explicit goal to be number one. Like there was no messing around. Like, oh yeah, we think we're gonna be a great team. No, like this organization is gonna be the best team in the world. Which obviously, what's intended is that they're gonna push an IP off the podium. They're gonna actually win everything. So they put a tremendous amount of pressure on their shoulders, whether it's their decision or the management or whoever was doing social. I don't know, but there was a very strict line that they were walking in terms of media. And then I remember watching them fall apart in moments and precisely in group stage of events where probably they didn't expect that level of competition, that level of competition that would come to their way. And I don't think they were equipped to deal with that. And once you lose once, twice, then suddenly it starts shaping to be its own person. Like that major actually becomes a person psychologically in your mind. You're like, holy shit. I also don't think people realize how dicey the group stage format of majors were.
Oh, they were wild. These were BO1s back then. Yeah, exactly.
I need to take just a minute for people to understand. So first of all, we were mostly playing what we used to call GSL, so which is winner bracket, loser bracket, best of one all the way. So you would win 2 games, you would make it through to the major playoffs, you would lose 2 games, you would be out. And when I say 2 games, I mean 2 maps, best of one.
Yep.
We also had that thing for the longest time that legends would be guaranteed a spot at the next major, which was huge. Like, it was absolutely huge.
Yes.
Basically, one best of one. Let's just say you were playing the decider game of a major. Winning that decider game in the group stage would guarantee you to be already present in the next major. And so when the stickers came around, and you can imagine what kind of impact it had on people's life in general, this is the kind of pressure that we were operating under. I'm not saying that the pros today have it easy. It's not what I'm saying, but it was much more cutthroat and, to be honest, quite stupid what we were doing at the time.
Well, so I mean, put it this way, just to clarify for a fan who doesn't get what you're saying there, like the difference now is, it's still a big deal if you do like well at a major now, but the difference is you still have an awesome salary and a great career and the rest of your career is going on. Like back then, like getting that sticker money, that's like life and death for some of these teams and players.
Yeah. It changes a lot. And also in terms of format, you have to imagine now most majors have a Swiss format, which is basically 2 best of one. And as soon as you start being at risk of being eliminated or in a chance of qualifying, then you play a best of 3. So you could potentially save yourself with 3 best of 3s back to back, and you can earn your way back to the legend stage of a major. That wasn't the case before. First of all, we didn't have a new challenger stage. It was 16 teams make the major. That is it. And when you were in the 16 teams, then you were playing that best of one group. So I think a whole lot of disappointments happened through these best of ones. And the ones that I experienced with Existence were all the same. It happened twice that we didn't make it through the group stage with him, which was 1 game very tight against a huge favorite that we should have won and we lose. And then after this, the floodgates, just basically the dam just breaks. And then the second game is shadow of yourself. You get absolutely destroyed by whoever is in front of you. I even lost to Penta, which was Crystal at the time.
Indeed.
German majority lineup. And when I say lose, I say 16-5 on cash. They walked over us. And this was just after we lost to Envy in an overtime game, which was one of the best teams in the world at the time. So these were very pressured matchups. And I think for Existence, probably he started doubting himself and doubting his own ability to lead in these moments. And that's basically how it fizzled out. And then you know what it is as a leader. Once you lose trust in yourself, very quickly your players start to realize that, and they start thinking, well, what the hell? Like, if this guy doesn't believe in what he's doing right now, then I can do it better than him. Like, what the fuck? Why am I following this guy? Like, I know how to do it. And he was surrounded, which was very complicated for him because he was surrounded by people who were amongst the very best in CSGO, and these very best people were not having success. You're talking Sharks. It's top 5 HLTV, I think probably back-to-back. NBK as well in the top 10. Like, huge fraggers, huge skill machines, and then here he is not making out a group stage at majors. And that's just not acceptable for anybody, for him, for his teammates, for the community. And he kind of fell in a hole of lack of trust, I would say.
The funny thing is, I don't think fans understand how often that happens. Like, basically, this is why when you have a window, like a team and an opportunity where you're like good enough and you have the right squad and, you know, it's the right opposition that you can beat and the right map pool and everything that you need to go your way. It's why you have to use that window and actually win then. You can't just wait like 4 years because, quite frankly, almost every single in-game, in fact, I might even say it might be every single in-game leader minute. Eventually, every single in-game leader has either a star or a team that's just sick of his voice and they don't want to hear it anymore and they want to play with someone else. Like, I can tell you everyone, spoiler, there's a reason Fnatic continued without Pronax, guys. I'm not going to speak on their behalf, but put it this way, they didn't think he was that good. I'll give you one that'll probably shock you right now. as far as I know, I don't think Forrest actually thinks Khan's all that good. I think he thought he was overrated a bit. I think he actually wanted to go separate ways in his career. Spoiler, I imagine some of them, who knows if they'll ever say this, I imagine some of the Astralis guys think there was life beyond Glaive, and maybe there's a different way to play CS. Like, to a fan, you just think these guys are the best. But I can tell you, the same thing is what happened with Carrigan, like 2 or 3 times in his career, Maniac. Like, what would happen is, it's like exactly as you say it, because these are really reflective guys we're talking about. These aren't just like look, the one thing I'll say is a positive for Happy is because he was kind of like blinkered and he only thought his way was the way. That meant that essentially he didn't have to second guess himself, though. He just do what he did, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So the problem these guys had is they're so reflective, like you say, they would get in their own head before it's even really happened yet. Like, I've heard the same thing with Carrigan in both FaZe and the Astralis line. I heard what happened was eventually, like, I think it usually spawned with those things, were like something like, which map do we play as like our 4th map or whatever, and then he would be like, well, I think this one, and then they'd lose a few times and the team would be like, no, we don't think that, we should play this other map that you're not as good. And then it's one of those ones where, because you then second guess it, oh, maybe I should do what they say, and then eventually like they just take over for everything, and then or they replace you with someone else. So that's not actually as shocking as people realise it. When you hear that, it doesn't mean that these players were shit. Spoil almost every in-game leader ever, like I say, eventually. Same thing in football, by the way. Eventually, even the greatest manager, if he's not winning all the time now, you have to replace him. Like, you just have to bring in a new voice, don't you? People, there's only so long you can listen to one guy.
Definitely, but the problem is, and I think this is probably one of the most unique aspects of being an IGL compared to other players, which obviously don't have an easy life, but let's just say that for IGLs specifically, once you start doubting, there's no way back. There's pretty much no way back. You either have some very solid teammates around you that help you build that confidence back up, and then together you sort of rise again, which is sort of the romanticized way, and I'm not exactly sure that happened many times in history. But if you start doubting whatever it is you want to do, it's a lose-lose scenario, because you either go with what you think it is, but there's a chance you're not going to do it as clean, as right, as confident as you would have done it, because you're starting to think about, oh, but what if this strategy doesn't work? Like, oh, maybe my teammate is right. Maybe we should play a little bit slow. So I'm going to maybe moderate a little bit, and I'm going to mitigate what is it that I want to do. So you end up with like a fake version of what was your first idea, which doesn't work, and then you look like an idiot. Or you straight up go with someone else's idea, and you don't have any ownership of what's happening. And then you're losing. You're still the face of the loss. You're still the IGL that's losing with that game, but you're not playing your game. And this is equally dangerous as a leader. I would argue this is what happened to Nafany. And this is a bad thing as a leader. It's unacceptable as a leader to have your powers being taken away from you by your team, and then just being a standing head here and heading into the losses and just say, listen, I had nothing to say. Then don't be a leader. Yes. Just do not be a leader in that. If you're not going to stand up for the playstyle that you're playing, for the Counter-Strike that you're playing, and the decisions that you're making, you're not supposed to be a leader. Spoiler alert, not everyone is equipped to do that. And this is why, famously in Counter-Strike, some strong personalities have tried to be IGLs, and not everyone has that success. And this is why we are sometimes impressed with how Apex has actually turned out, because we thought it wouldn't work. We thought it was one of these scenarios where he'd never really have the shoulder to stomach that kind of pressure. It's going to crumble. And actually, no, it turned out great. So if you are a leader and you are not ready to stand up for what you believe is the right way to go, there's no positive issue. It's just a matter of delaying when things are going to go to hell. Either your players are going to turn on you, or you're going to just basically cannibalize yourself in doubt. And that has happened to more than one leader in the history of CS.
Oh, I'll tell everyone, and what a recent example that you'll know if you've been following the recent scene, I would say is Nitro and Team Liquid. Lurpus actually called this. If people don't know, I really do get sick of that, mate, is where like it's the like modern kids, these nephews who just don't know people, and then they act like you're a nobody. It's like, why are you going to act like Lurpus is nobody? You know, he was like a top in-game leader in 1.6 for like a fucking half a decade or something. If people don't know, he even literally was headhunted and went and played in the American Evil Geniuses at a time when nobody went to other countries and was like we didn't have international teams back then. Like, people act like this guy is just like fucking a Twitter head. Like, he was actually like a mega expert about the game. So anyway, one thing he pointed out ages ago was when they had that storyline where it was like that whole thing of like Nitro and Yekindar, where it was like, oh, Nitro turned up late to the boot camp, so, you know, we're just going to have Yekindar call on like a few of the maps. He called it then, dude. He was just like, this is just the end of Nitro's the IGL. Like, this is just them literally, whether he knows it or not, transitioning him out. And spoiler, once you give up a few maps like that, like, you never get him back, mate. Like, he's just going to keep doing that. And then what he's going to do is he's going to, oh, maybe I'll take, you know, Mirage as well. And then eventually you haven't got any maps left. Or even worse, they cock you totally. This has happened a few times with IGLs I won't mention. And at the end, you're still listed as IGL, but you do like one map or something like that, or you just do like T-side on one map or some shit like that, and they just like in name let you be the ideal. Like that is death. Like when that happens, you can see it coming. See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.